Hello everyone, Nick the DM here. Let me explain the disaster that was my thought process leading up to this video. I started first with a list of every demon lord, then started making videos for each individual demon lord. But then I wanted to work on a complete guide to all of demon lordness. Halfway through that script, I decided, I couldn't make a demon lord video without first covering demons in their entirety. And of course, I couldn't make a video on demons without first covering the all-encompassing creature type, fiends. So, here we are. Let's take a look. The term fiend is used to refer to evil creatures native to the outer planes. But what is evil? Most people think that they know evil when they see it, but if you take a moment to define evil, most of the time two creatures' definitions of evil will not match up. Evil is different for different people and creatures, and the best way to exemplify this is a passage written by Ice the Thriceborn, a tiefling planar scholar, recording an exchange between a Barrior, who was potentially a member of the Society of Sensation, and a Githzerai at the Civic Fest Hall in Sigil. So, here's that conversation.
Evil? That's simple. Evil is trying to ruin and destroy, trying to return the multiverse to a state of nothingness.
Feh! Sounds like the Doom God to me, and some of those bashers are as virtuous as a solar.
Well, what I really meant was trampling anything that gets in your way.
Oh yeah? Let me tell you about this little thing called the Modron March. Seems these critters, neutral, by the way, stomp their way around the great ring, running over whatever's in their path.
All right, then. Evil is selfishness, concern for nothing and no one but yourself, thinking that—
Hold it right there, Burke. I belong to the Fated, and I don't care about you, your friends, or anything else but getting ahead in the cosmos. That ain't evil, that's just knowing how to help yourself.
Fine. Evil is— it's trying to limit the freedoms of those around you, trying to force everyone else to do things the way you think they should be done.
Now you've pegged the harmonium. You willing to go tell a hardhead that you think he's wicked? Come to think of it, what you just said applies to most cutters on the upper planes, too. Here comes a diva now. Why don't I—
Enough, you rascal. I'll tell you what evil is. It's inflicting grievous harm on others, whether physical suffering or mental strife, without just cause.
Ah, you mean like the lady. No one knows what makes her flay a Burke, or stick him in the mazes, or just leave him alone, do they? Most smart cagers figure that means she's as neutral as they come.
And that was all Ice the Thriceborn wrote, further stating that they were still arguing when he left. The lesson is, no matter how you define evil, there will always be someone to poke holes in your theory. That doesn't mean we'll never be able to figure out what is or isn't evil, it just means that there are different types of evil. Take the three main races of fiends. They all act very differently. If a Beatezu captured a mortal, it'd probably lock him up in a dungeon, or try to corrupt his soul through cruel discipline. A Yugoloth would turn the mortal into a puppet, exploit him for all he was worth, and then savor the despairing moment when the poor soul realized that he'd been used. A tanar'ri would probably just rip the creature's head off. Is one fiend more evil than the others? It depends on who you ask. Some might consider a quick death more merciful than a prolonged torment. Some might think oblivion is much, much worse. Ice's definition of evil is, quote, being willfully, maliciously, pointedly indifferent to the needs of others just for the sake of doing it, not because you necessarily have anything to gain from it, end quote. Just try to work out your own definition of evil and see if, after you learn something, maybe if you learn something in this video, your definition stays the same or changes. Anyways, on to fiends. Fiends are more than physical beings, they are born of evil. Primal malevolence is one of the roots of their nature. The truth of the matter is that all fiends are formed and shaped by their environment. They are planar beings in the truest sense of the word. The hateful essence of the lower planes permeates every piece of a fiend's body. As creatures of the outer planes, they are partially made up of the belief of those planes. and fiends can be affected by the belief of others. That's the whole point of the Blood War, in the words of Ice the Thriceborn. The struggle to determine which philosophy of evil deserves to reign over the lower planes. It's part of how they ascend through their various hierarchies, and it's why they're affected by the summonings and spells of mortals. But how can an ordinary mortal influence a fiend through the power of belief? Well, it's been said that belief is all that sustains a paladin's aura or the strength of a priest's wards. In other words, the power of their belief in their deity, their faith in the holy protection offered, is what keeps the fiends away. But that belief isn't enough. The wards function because there's something of a god within them. Mere faith isn't enough to cut it. A mortal can't just think away a demon that's about to rip them into pieces. The fiends are children of substance as well as belief, though not nearly as much as mortals are. Naturally, plenty of other factors go into the making of a fiend. So let's touch on a few of those. Their place of origin. According to the tiefling scholar Ice the Thriceborn, whose notes make up the first chapter of Advanced D&D 1st Edition Faces of Evil the Fiends, a fiend is, strictly speaking, an evil creature from one of the lower planes. If it comes from anywhere else, it isn't a fiend. Period. However, on the other hand, they mention that not everything that comes from the lower planes is a fiend. Funnily enough, the example used is a shadow fiend, stating that even a monster with fiend in the name isn't a fiend. However, recent scholars and recent editions of Dungeons & Dragons have classified the shadow fiends as fiends, specifically demons, even renaming them to shadow demon. Realistically, there are only 5 different main groups of fiends. The devils, the demons, the Yugoloths, also called the daemons, the Geharoliths, also called the Demodads, and the Hordlings. Though outside of those 5 main races of fiends, there are numerous standalone species that don't seem to come from any specific race of fiends, like the Rakshasa or the Barghest. That doesn't mean there won't be more classifications or grouped races of fiends in the future, but those are the only big 5 groups so far. Hordlings aren't even really recognized in modern editions. Immortality. No one knows exactly how long fiends can live. Most theories suggest that they are immortal, and that seems to be the case. Like dragons, fiends grow more powerful with time. Some, like the Yugoloth's General of Gehenna and the Beatezu's Dark Eight, are thought to have led their race forever. Of course, immortal doesn't mean invulnerable. Fiends can be killed just like any other creature, just sometimes with a bit more difficulty. Though, are they truly immortal? Who really knows? Most beings won't be around to see if a fiend makes it from the first breath of the multiverse to the last. The powers may know the answer to that question, but if they do, they aren't saying. No one's ever seen a fiend grow old or die of, quote, natural causes. Plenty of fiends can mate and produce smaller versions of themselves that get bigger and stronger as the years go on, but the offspring aren't aging, just developing until they reach a certain point, usually called adulthood by mortals. Likewise, when a fiend earns a promotion in the ranks and gets reshaped into a completely different kind of creature, it's not growing or aging, just changing. Even if the fiends aren't immortal, their lives are undeniably fantastically long, long enough to give them a perspective few other creatures on the planes can achieve. Because of this, fiends pick up on the idea of patience quickly. A century is nothing to them. From a mortal point of view, the fiends effectively have forever to cook up new schemes for violence or revenge. To quote the words of Ice the Thriceborn from Faces of Evil the Fiends, quote, "In the end, there's really only one way to know if the fiends are immortal. First, figure out how to become immortal yourself. That's the easy part. Second, capture a fiend alive, lock it in a magically warded cell, and make sure it doesn't get out. That's a good deal harder. And third, sit back and wait. If the fiend eventually dies, you'll know it wasn't immortal. But if you're both sitting there at the end of time, you'll know it was. Hope the answer was worth the trouble." End quote. Next, when it comes to fiends, we are talking about their gender/sex. Back in the time when Advanced D&D 2nd Edition Faces of Evil the Fiends was published, those terms were used more interchangeably. Nowadays, not so much. So mostly we're referring to sex in the terms of biologically for fiends, so that's what we're going to go with. Sometimes when someone refers to a fiend, they will call a fiend a him, some like to call a fiend a her, and most like to call a fiend an it. Sometimes one person will slide back and forth between pronouns when referring to a fiend, but that's only because many fiends tend to do the same. There's no sense in locking yourself into one style when the fiends don't follow suit. Though, what is the difference between a male and a female fiend? Not even 1 in 1,000 mortals could look at a Balor and tell its sex or gender. It's not like all females wear dresses, and one interesting fact, fiends don't have the same kind of telltale glands mortals do to nurse their young. Fiends aren't even mammals. So in the case of the fiends like the succubus, the Merilith, and the Erinyes, or Erinyes, or Erinyes, however you pronounce it, what's going on there is just for show. There's no function to that. And honestly, that's kind of interesting. Sure, sometimes males and females might exhibit signs of sex like slight variation in horns, scales, or pupils, but the main difference is in their internal organs. Males sire children, females bear them, and that's it. Of course, that won't make any difference to the average person, not unless a fiend is set on mating with them, and they'd better pray it never comes to that, despite all of the proclamations of the bard. True names. It is said that within the breast of every being there is a space that echoes to some feature of the cosmos, a sound that sums up a being's desires, hates, fate, and most hidden self. This is called the true name, or the secret name. Fiends, like most creatures aware of their true name, hide theirs as best they can. True names, as any student of the occult arts can tell you, are the most powerful form of binding known. A fiend's true name is what allows it to be summoned by a mortal or enslaved by a superior. The true name, when spoken, is the total summation of a fiend's essence, and the individual who speaks it twists the desire of the fiend so it has no choice but to respond. The speaking of the name, along with certain rituals, offerings, or threats, can summon the creature from across the planes against its will. And once a summoner calls a fiend, they can use the true name spell to do it great harm. That is why fiends are always looking to uncover the secret names of their enemies, to pass on the name to mortals, who can punish the named fiend or bind them into service. Of course, uncovering the true name of a fiend is no easy task. They keep them hidden until the day they die, and they do their best to destroy any and all records of the name that somehow make it into books. There is a chance a fiend may not even know their own true name, and this is particularly brutal on the fiends. Mortals hardly ever stumble into their true names, but fiends need to know the truths of their essence to get ahead. If a fiend doesn't have that, it prevents it from ascending as fast as it would like. Some say that a fiend's true name changes completely when it is promoted to the next level in the hierarchy, though Ice the Thriceborn believes it is more likely a fiend's name evolves with them, changing only as much as the creature does. And at its core, it's probably the same name, just with a few additions. A fiend called by an old version of its true name isn't bound nearly as well, and it'll delight in showing the summoner just how free it is. Next up, we're taking a look at fiends visiting the prime material. It's no secret that fiends appear on the prime material plane more often than most mortals would like. But why do fiends show such interest in the prime? Well, while each fiendish species and furthermore each individual fiend has their own goals, the general reason for fiends coming to the material planes are the following. From a fiend's point of view, mortals are dung and vermin. However, that doesn't mean they're useless, though. The fiends discovered the prime long ago, and they've used mortals in their schemes ever since. They count on mortals as future fodder for the Blood War, Aaron Yes, Glabrizu, and Succubi, and others try to tempt and corrupt mortals over to their side, so that when they die, they end up on the proper lower plane. Sometimes the fiends just snatch living mortals and drag them home to use as slaves, mercenaries, or foodstuffs. And sometimes they just like to play with them, like how a cat torments a mouse before the kill. From a fiend's perspective, a mortal lifespan is pitifully short, allowing them to study mortals for many lifetimes. This grants fiends extraordinary insight into mortal character, though they often have to wait until they are decently high-powered before they can put this knowledge to use. Most weaker fiends don't usually deal with mortals, apart from the odd familiar serving a wizard, and fiends need to gather wisdom before they can even use it. But when they begin to use that knowledge, it makes a fiend truly dangerous. It's said there is no mortal reaction that surprises a high-up fiend, not even from the Chaos Men of Sigil. Fiends can play mortals like gut harps. That is just how good they are at what they do. Fiends also use the worlds of the Prime as battlegrounds or bolt holes for the Blood War. Most of the outer planes are too well defended by the natives, Modrons, Asimon, Gardenels, etc., to let the fiends grab much of a toehold. The fiends see the clueless mortals of the Prime as pushovers, whether they're correct or not, and they bring their battles to the Prime material worlds without a care. Most of all, though, the Prime is a wellspring of faith. The outer planes run on belief, and the fiends thrive on it. So, if creatures journey to the Prime and convince the clueless to fear and respect them, they gain the strength of that belief. That alone is enough reason for the fiends to terrorize mortals on the Prime. Though in recent editions of Dungeons & Dragons, the effect faith has for fiends isn't documented very well, the knowledge and influence gained by going to the Prime material still gives fiends a reason to do it. Not only that, but just making pacts with mortals to gain more power as well. Summoning fiends. There's no shortage of fools willing to summon fiends. Different types of fiends have some specifics unique to them, but in general, here's what to expect. The first thing is whether a summoner knows the true name of a fiend or not. Most casters don't, so they're stuck with a lesser calling, which sorely limits what they can get. The specific types of fiends changes with each edition and each spell, so we're not going to go too far into that detail. It's possible that a very high-level monster summoning spell will call a more powerful fiend, but doing this without knowing the creature's true name is ill-advised. If a summoner does know the true name of a fiend, they can call the creature to their plane with spells like Gate, Ensnarement, or Cacofiend. These spells can catch higher-ranking Beatezu, tanar'ri, and Yugoloths, but a spellcaster must take care how they go about the summoning. A gate merely opens a doorway to the named fiend it can step through or toss a minion through in its place, and whatever shows up is pretty much free to do whatever it likes. With Ensnarement and Cacofiend, a summoner can bind the summoned fiend into a warding circle, or try anyways. If they succeed, the creature is trapped until it agrees to perform a service, or until it figures out how to get free. Of course, enslaving a fiend like this won't do much to make the creature happy. No doubt there's plenty of magical items and other methods of calling fiends from the lower planes, but these are the best known and most widely used as of 2nd edition. And seeing that spellcasters have survived these methods to spread this information, it seems they are methods that casters can count on. Though it has been suggested that all fiends sprang from one primal source, they are incredibly different in their outlooks and goals, though I will detail those differences in the videos on those fiends in the future. Now, for those truly adventurous or unfortunate heroes who do end up facing fiends, Dragon Magazine issue 279 has an article on facing these creatures called Versus Fiends. So here are some tips for fighting fiends. Keep in mind that this magazine was published for 3rd edition, so some terminology might not be similar to other editions, but I'll try to explain what I can and elaborate where I have time without going too long on rambling. Quote, "If you cannot flee, there is only one other choice. Win. The alternative is unthinkable." End quote. Sir Theelvin, Knight of the Chalice. Fiends are a lot more than just hit dice and armor class. Damage reduction, spell resistance, energy resistance, regeneration, spell-like abilities, and the living embodiment of all that is evil, that sums up what it is to face a fiend. Anyone planning to fight one of these unholy outsiders had better be prepared for all these extras. Some helpful tips just right off the bat when dealing with fiends. Pin down demons and other fiends, but specifically demons, with Dimensional Anchor, which as of 3rd edition prevented not only planar travel but most teleportation and spell-like or psionic abilities. Nowadays, fiends just have an innate ability to teleport, and it's a much shorter distance. Back in the days of 2nd edition, they had an ability to teleport without error at will, which was a much longer distance. Another tip is to just unleash a flood of holy water. The more holy water, the better, especially if it can cover a large area or even just prevent anyone from coming near, or prevent fiends from coming near you. Do something about their spell-like abilities, even with like an anti-magic field. Hit them with some holy power and spell penetration, and use sonic and force effects against demons, electricity against devils with spell penetration, and there were no tips for Yugoloths or others. Now, these are just very vague, helpful tips. However, we're going to be getting into more specifics just now. Preparation. Fiends tend to show up when you least expect them, disguised as the king's advisor, the helpless captive, or even the adorable mutt. Still, some people make a career out of hunting them down for some unknown and foolish reason. So here are some tips for building a Fiend Slayer. Fiends have spell resistance, making spellcasters almost useless if their spells can't get past it. So spell penetration is a must, allowing spellcasters to have a bonus to their check to overcome spell resistance. This was again 3rd edition, where if a creature had spell resistance, a spellcaster trying to target the creature would need to make a check to overcome their spell resistance. A spell penetration would allow them to gain a bonus to that. Nowadays, most of the times, higher level fiends will have magic resistance, which is just advantage against spells. So it's a little harder to overcome, but the most important part is to have a variety of spells to affect them. As the champions of holy powers, clerics and paladins have some good spells for dealing with the minions of utter evil. Divine spells such as Dispel Evil, Dismissal, or Banishment can end an encounter in 1 round. And because of their additional abilities, fiends in 3rd edition had lower hit dice for their challenge rating, making them more susceptible for spells like Dismissal, which was based on hit dice. Holy Smite and Holy Word are especially useful against evil creatures, and Holy Aura will help ward off a fiend's spell-like abilities. And of course, who's better at fighting the fiends than Celestials using spells like Planar Ally? Holy Water and a Paladin's Smite Evil can provide plenty of extra damage in battles against fiends, and a Paladin being immune to fear while simultaneously providing their allies with bonuses against fear with their Aura of Courage can be indispensable. This is pretty well easily translated into modern editions, where most of the time a Paladin will have one or multiple auras, either giving the party a bonus to saving throws, making them immune to fear, etc., etc. Finally, one of the biggest things for facing fiends is magic items. Magic weapons are a must for anyone who intends to use a weapon against a fiend, as every fiend has some sort of damage reduction. Spellcasters can load up on scrolls and wands, carrying some of the most useful spells they have, including spells a level or 2 above what they are personally able to cast. These might be expensive, but they're worth it if you can prepare in advance. And don't neglect healing spells. And of course, against high-level fiends with multiple attacks and high bonuses to attack rolls, a party wants the best armor class they can manage. Magic armor, rings, bracers, amulets, the works. And powerful cloaks of resistance can help against spell-like abilities, especially in 5th edition if it is a cloak of spell resistance, giving advantage on saving throws. Now for some tactics against fiends. When you first encounter the fiends, consider running away. Seriously, especially if you are not fully prepared. If you can run away and return better prepared without any serious consequences, that's your best option. Even paladins should not have an issue with this tactic, justifying allowing a fiend to live for a short time more in order to ensure its defeat and the team's survival is a fairly reasonable thing to argue toward. Most demons have the ability to teleport without error at will, at least in older editions. Now it is a little bit minor, but the teleporting can still be annoying with higher level fiends. Many use this as an escape route. Others use it to drive an opponent crazy with hit and run tactics, or moving just out of melee range for ranged attacks or spell-like attacks. Dimensional Anchor, as I mentioned earlier, was made for just this event. The Fiend will probably still be faster than any character, and most of them can fly, but at least there's one less thing to worry about. Fiends have many spell-like abilities, and the more powerful the Fiend, the more spell-like abilities it is loaded with. Using an anti-magic field is an option worth weighing, particularly if you're facing a Fiend whose spell-like abilities are wreaking havoc on a party. Toe-to-toe in non-magical combat, a Fiend can be overtaken by the marshals of the party. Back in the day, this negated not only the magic weapons of the party, but apparently an anti-magic field also negated the Fiend's damage reduction. Here is my disclaimer. As of modern recordings from scholars and from modern editions of the games, a Fiend's damage reduction at this current point in the timeline is not affected by anti-magic fields. Similarly, they don't possess as many spell-like abilities and have a lot more innate abilities. I will not be responsible for any overconfident fighters trying to face a Fiend head-on only to end up with their head off. Choosing energy/damage types is probably one of the most important things when facing the Fiends. Most Fiends are immune to poison, and depending on the edition, demons have some sort of resistance or immunity to fire, lightning, cold, and acid. Meanwhile, devils are immune to fire completely, and had some sort of resistance, generally, to cold, and in some editions, acid. So a pyromancer slinging fire spells at any Fiend, really, will be mostly useless, or, at best case scenario, very, very heavily hindered. This makes lightning useful against devils, but overall the best options against the Fiends are thunder/sonic damage types. Force spells were a good option, especially spells like Magic Missile, Bigby's Hand, or nowadays Disintegrate. Radiant spells mentioned earlier are effective, and back in 3rd edition and earlier, negative levels or energy drain could be extremely effective, because very few, if any, creatures were immune to those. And there you have it, a summary of the Fiends. Obviously, this is a very general explanation, but worry not, due to my need to complete any topic I'm covering and the mild insanity that is a part of that, I do intend to make videos covering each race of Fiend. Just don't hold your breath. Expeditions of the Plains take some time. But if you have enjoyed this video and are looking forward to those future videos, consider subscribing to support my effort and liking the video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!